back to 3 Ways To. I am Jenna, and today I'm going to show you 3 ways to add a quilt label to your quilt. And if you're wondering, why do I need a quilt label? It's because people need to know that you made the quilt and that is not from Walmart, it's not from IKEA, it is a handmade, beautiful piece of art. Also, how are people gonna know that you made it 100 years down the line when you're dead? I don't know. That's why you need a quilt label. The first label I'm gonna show you how to make is a cute little corner label, and it just goes in the corner of your quilt and on the back behind your binding. Super duper easy, and I'm going to show you how to free motion quilt it using your domestic machine. First, you're going to choose a fabric, whatever fabric you want, and I like to use a fusible interfacing on the back. My go-to is SF101, but you can do really whatever you want. You just want it to be a lighter weight interfacing. And I always cut out a piece that is bigger than what I want my label to be, just in case I mess up or I don't get things super centered. Then we're going to prep our piece by drawing out where we want everything. Because I know I'm going to fold this piece in half, I like to take a heat erasable marker, and I like to do it as close to the color of fabric that I'm using so I can still see it, but if by chance it doesn't heat erase, then I'll be good to go. No one will ever notice, but these ones I've done my research. Then once we have the middle marked, I like to measure down by first 1/4 inch and then just mark there. And what I'm doing now is I'm going to create lines that I can write out what I want to say, and then I can go ahead and free motion quilt it, and it's more likely to be accurate. And I like little 1/2 inch sections with 1/4 inch sections in between, sometimes even 1/8 inch section in between. But this just helps me know exactly where to put everything. Then once I have the lines kind of where I want them, now I can go and write what I want to say. So maybe I want to say, made with love. And anytime I'm writing out what I want to say, because I'm free motioning it, I want it to be in cursive. Made with love. And then maybe I want to say, by Jenna. If I don't like this, I can always put my iron on top of it, heat erase it, and then try again. But I am liking the way this looks. So now we can go ahead and free motion it. If you're free motion quilting on your home sewing machine, you're gonna want a free motion quilting foot. Your stitches will turn out better. It will be a lot easier to move your fabric around. But if you don't, you can try to use just a plain needle and then drop your feed dogs. But I've had 50-50 chance with that. So I'd highly recommend a free motion quilting foot. On the Little Rebel, I like to use the micro stippling foot just because it allows for a lot more visibility as I am writing out these words. I always like to start with my needle down, and then I am just going to move the fabric around to trace my Made with Love by Jenna. And then when I get to the end, I can just take this guy off, clip my threads, and go to the next row. Ah! I dropped my scissors! Let's get this guy out of the way. And then I can hop to the next word. And if you don't want to connect words, you can just move your foot up and go to the next spot without having to cut anything, and then you can cut it all at the very end. Ta-da! Then I can just clip all the threads in between my by and my Jenna. And then to get rid of all of my lines, I am just going to run it over the iron. And now I have my label that I can now press in half. And then, because I made this bigger, I want to cut it down to fit the corner a little bit better. And so when I am measuring out my corner, I just like to make sure there's a 1/2 inch from the edge of both pieces. So this one, it looks like 5. If I line up the diagonal on 5 1/4 on both sides, then that looks pretty good to me. I can go ahead and chop it off. And now it is ready to put on the corner of my quilt. And to put this guy on the corner of your quilt, all you're going to do is just line it up in the raw edge of one of the corners, clip it, then you can sew baste it 1/8 inch in here and here before you put on your binding. And then you put on your binding like normal and it is easy peasy. What some people do like to do, and I like to do this, is so that there's not a pocket right here, you can hand sew this edge closed with whip stitch. The next way we're going to create a label is by creating a nice little patch, and instead of sewing, embroidering what we want to say on, we're going to use a Sharpie, and I'll show you how. Anytime that I'm writing on fabric or doing embroidery of some kind on fabric, I like to use, again, a fusible interfacing. SF101 is my favorite. And for this specific method, I want to cut the interfacing exactly the size that I want for my label. And for my label this time, I want it to be 4 by 3 inches. Then I can go ahead and press that onto the back of just a random scrap piece of fabric, whatever I want to be my label. And just know anytime you are putting fusible interfacing on, you are going to need lots and lots of steam. And then I can go ahead and cut around this label. I like to do it like 3/8 inch. I found that 1/4 inch is a little too small for my liking, but I'll cut around the fusible interfacing. 3/8 inch. Perfect. And now I can write on it with Sharpie. How fun is that? You're gonna want a ultra fine tip point permanent marker, and I like to use the ruler as my guide. So instead of drawing lines using a heat erasable pen, technically you could do that too if you want. One trick is lining up the ruler where you want it, and then writing right on top of that. So if I say, let's say, should I continue with the Made with Love by Jenna part? Let's do it. Made with love. And look how straight that is. And then I can do by Jenna. And then maybe I want a heart because I like hearts, okay? It's made with love. Now, if you're wondering, wait, this is gonna wash out, or how do I keep it in place? What you wanna do is you want to steam the heck out of this. So in order to set the Sharpie in place, you're gonna wanna steam it. So I will put another just piece of scrap fabric I have on top of my piece. And then I just wanna steam this for a good little bit, like 30 seconds. By steaming the ink, what that does is it just kind of sets it in place so it's less likely to bleed anywhere and it's less likely to fade a whole lot after every wash. Then, once the Sharpie's set, you can fold up the edges of this fabric against the fusible to fold all those raw edges in. Ooh, that steam got me that time. Then you can fold in the other two sides. Then, when you go to sew this guy on, you can pin it where you want it. And you can do a nice little whip stitch around the edge. So to do my whip stitch, you'll first put your needle into your backing and then you'll bring it back up through the backing and the label around 1/4 or 1/2 inch of distance, whatever you prefer. I like 1/2 inch, but I just want to make sure my needle just clips or hooks onto that label just barely. And then it will hold everything down nice and tight. I'm just gonna clip the edge. So I'm not going super far into the edge of my label. And then I can hand sew this label on all the way around till it is finished. The last way we're gonna add a label is by printing directly onto fabric using your regular printer at home. It's a lot easier than you think. First, we gotta prep our fabric to be able to go through the printer, and so that's why we're gonna need, again, some fusible. And I wanna cut it to be a little bit bigger than the standard printer size paper. So standard printer size paper is 11 by 8.5 inches. So I'm gonna do 9 by 11.5 inches, just for some extra wiggle room. Then I can go ahead and fuse it onto a piece of fabric that is a similar size. And whatever fusible you're using, remember to listen to your manufacturer's instructions and just fuse it on that way. Every fusible is slightly different. Then we can cut it down to the standard size piece of paper. And this is what's super important. You want to be as precise as you can, and that's why we like using rulers. You can get more precise measurements with a ruler rather than the mat. So I am going to first trim one side. And if you're wondering what rulers I'm using, I love the True Cut square ruler bundle. There are 3 rulers that come in it, and I feel like I'm grabbing these 3 rulers the most often. So they're just super easy. And then by using this 12.5 inch ruler, I can easily measure out my 8.5 inches by 11 inches. And now we have a perfect paper size piece of fabric that we can take over to the printer. And I went ahead and made myself some labels and printed it out to see if I liked it, and I love it. I think it's so cute. So now let's head over to our printer and I'll show you how to print it. Are you ready to see how cool this is? Okay, before you put it into your printer, you want to make sure that you know if your printer likes to print from the front or from the back of your paper. I know that this specific printer, if I lay it the right side up, it will print on the right side. So I'm just gonna stick this guy into my printer, and then you can print it off from like your computer at home, but I'm just making a copy because this is the work printer. I'll put this guy down, and then are you ready? All I have to do is press one copy, and it's gonna come right there. Are you ready for this? Look at that. It's all my labels. And then, just like with the Sharpie, we want to steam these guys so the ink is set. Every time I do this, it just reminds me of how when people used to press newspapers to set the ink so that the ink didn't smear and run all over everyone's hands as they were reading the newspaper. So we're just taking it back a few decades. Maybe more than a few decades, let's be honest. Then, once everything is set, I can cut these guys down to the size I want them, and I can sew them the same way I sewed the last label on, just hand stitching around the edge. But they're just so dang darn cute. Oh my goodness, this is precious. What's fun about these labels too is you can make your own like fold up label that you can just sew into the edge of your binding, and that's super duper easy. With these printable labels, I've seen people print out like 2 labels on a sheet, and then you can cut them out in a circle or a star or a heart or any random shape you want to personalize your label even more. And if you're wondering if these guys are gonna last you a long time, I have found that with a printable label, because it's not technically fabric ink, they are going to fade with every wash, but I found that it doesn't fade too bad, and I can still see it and I still love it. And with all of these methods of making labels, you can switch out if you want to write something with Sharpie, if you want to embroider it, if you want to print it. There are so many different ways to personalize it for the quilts that you make. Which of these 3 ways is your favorite way to add a quilt label? And if you have another favorite way, please put it down in the comments. I would love, love, love to learn from you. If you learned something new, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.